Canada is broke, or at least that's what a new report is saying, and it has the RCMP worried that Canadians soon are about to revolt. I hate to disappoint them, but it feels like we're already there. Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. Justin Trudeau and his Liberals, we've talked numerous times about the scandals that are going on, and it's of no surprise to anybody. Arrive scam, the AgaCon, the We Charity Foundation, profits during lockdowns, you name it, it's out there. We're SNC Lavalin, like the list goes on and on and on. But we're not going to get into any of that today. In a sense, what I wanted to address was yesterday's video that was dropped about Pierre Poilievre calling for the carbon tax election. Now, one thing that is stated in that video, and one thing that comes out very clear, is that Canadians have had enough, and he feels that this vote through the House of Commons for a vote of non-confidence, if Justin Trudeau is so sure that this is what Canadians want, then they should allow Canadians the ability to vote, to have their say in what they want in terms of leadership, and in terms of if they support carbon tax, well, then they'll obviously just vote in Justin Trudeau again. Now, good old Captain Sucks, well, he's worried about that, and of course he doesn't want to hold an election because he knows the truth. According to Pierre Poilievre, 70% of Canadians, as well as 7 different premiers of provinces, all stand to, quote, spike the hike as of April 1st, and now a new report coming out stating that the RCMP warn of a revolt, a potential revolt amongst Canadians once they find out just how broke we are. And we're going to get into that. But just before we do, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind everybody, now would be a good time to double check that you're still subscribed to this channel. YouTube has a history of unsubscribing our viewers, as well as removing your notifications or failing to notify people when videos drop. So just double check if you are subscribed to the channel that you're still subscribed, and if you're not, make sure to go and click that button. It always helps the channel out and helps us to continue to produce this kind of content. But let's slip over just on a quick follow-up. Some of the things that have come out recently and come to light, and part of the reason why Canadians might revolt and why Canadians are probably broke. Well, this clip here from Mark Genius, unbelievable. Trudeau's NDP Liberal government gave $7.9 million to Dalian as part of Arrive scam. Dalian did not do any actual work on the app. Arrive scam contractors are being investigated by the RCMP. Dalian benefited from an Indigenous contracting system designed to give contracts to Indigenous businesses, but the Liberal minister responsible for Indigenous procurement couldn't explain why no Indigenous people benefited from this $7.9 million given to Dalian for no work. Indigenous procurement should benefit Indigenous people, not NDP Liberal government insiders. Now, this again is very shocking. And while these scandals don't really surprise us anymore, let's take a quick minute. We'll listen to what went down just verbatim so people have context as to what happened. And then we're going to get into what the RCMP are worried about since they're investigating this potential fraud.
Minister Haidu, Canadians would expect that the Indigenous procurement system be designed to benefit Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities, not a small number of well-connected NDP Liberal government insiders. Dalian is a 2-person company. They don't do actual work. They just get government contracts and subcontract to others. How many Indigenous people benefited from the $7.9 million that your government sent to Dalian for Arrive scam?
So I think I'll just blow by the stupid slogans and begin by answering the question in a sincere way, which is what I would hope we would all do around this table, because these are serious issues and sincere concerns. Let me just back up and say Indigenous Services Canada does manage...
Please don't back up. Please just answer the question.
I would love to do that. Are you ready to listen?
Go for it.
All right, great.
How many Indigenous people benefited? Just the number would be fine, actually.
So the Indigenous Business Directory is a directory that Indigenous Services Canada maintains to provide to other departments of Canada a list of businesses that have been verified as either...
Sorry, Minister, this is a two-person company. They don't do any actual work. They're listed on the Indigenous Businesses Directory. They receive contracts and subcontract. That's all they do. They get government contracts. They subcontract the work to others. How many Indigenous people benefited from the $7.9 million that your government gave to Dalian? I'm not looking for a history of the program.
So to understand the Indigenous Business Directory, you have to understand what it's for. And the Indigenous Business Directory is to provide assurances to other departments, including Procurement Canada, that the people on that list are Indigenous. And so that is the sole purpose of the list. It's about indigeneity.
Okay. Minister, what Mr. Yeo told the Public Accounts Committee yesterday is that the purpose of the program is not to benefit Indigenous communities, but only to benefit the particular individuals who receive the contracts. What you've just said effectively confirms that. It sounds like you have no information about whether Indigenous peoples or communities actually benefited beyond the two people who got $7.9 million for no work.
So, I'm only laughing because it's just asinine at this point that a liberal like this would sit and say, "I'm going to blow past the snide remarks and the quips." I mean, they have no excuse as to why this money has been given out. We're talking millions, if not $250 million, since Trudeau took office. But this is particularly to Arrive scam. $7.9 million to an agency that essentially does nothing. And she keeps talking about Indigenous. You'll notice with the Liberals, there's a pattern that they use words like gender equity, inclusivity, Indigenous this, Indigenous that. They want to put in those trigger words to get people convinced that, hey, this is all in the process of shedding light on those who are oppressed or those who maybe have a disadvantage in the world, when in reality, they've done nothing to help the Indigenous. And if you want to question, well, Justin Trudeau has done things to help the Indigenous, why do they still not have clean drinking water? It seems like something in this day and age that could be easily solved, especially when you look at all the money that's been funneled out to the Ukraine. If he was really concerned about equity within our people and making sure that those with a disadvantage are looked after, well, then he could surely do something to help the Indigenous, rather than giving out benefits to his friends. But alas, this secret RCMP report has come out now warning Canadians that they may revolt once they realize how broke they are. It says here, right from the get-go, the report authors warned that whatever Canada's current situation is, it'll probably deteriorate further in the next 5 years. A secret RCMP report is warning that the federal government that Canada may descend into civil unrest once citizens realize that hopelessness on their economic situation. The coming period of recession will accelerate the decline in living standards that the younger generations have already witnessed compared to earlier generations, reads the report, entitled Whole of Government 5-Year Trends for Canada. For example, many Canadians under 35 are unlikely ever to be able to buy a place to live, it adds. The report, labeled secret, is intended as a piece of, quote, special operational information to be distributed only within the RCMP and among, quote, decision makers in the federal government. A heavily redacted version was made public as a result of an access to information request filed by Matt Malone, an assistant professor of law with British Columbia's Thompson River University and an expert in government secrecy. Describing herself as an introduction as a scanning exercise, the report is intended to highlight trends in both Canada and abroad that could have a significant effect on the Canadian government and the RCMP. Well, when we're talking currently about the Canadian government and RCMP, we're talking about corruption. So how is the corrupt spending, how is the corrupt money laundering and the corrupt robbing people of their tax dollars going to affect those who stole the money? Well, in addition to worsening living standards, the RCMP also warns of a future increasingly defined by unpredictable weather and seasonal catastrophes such as wildfires or arson, flooding. Most notably, report authors warn Canada facing increasing pressure to cede Arctic territory. This is laughable at best. Anytime they talk about the weather and the carbon, this is where, and I have to apologize. Usually I have these things ready, but I will pull up a post out from Tamara Leach earlier today, who actually broke down the reality of Canada's carbon problems. Here we go. You're being lied to repeatedly and taxed into non-existence. In the meantime, the very people responsible are giving themselves another nice big fat pay raise soon. Oh, and it's all on you, of course. What would you peons possibly do with that extra money anyways besides feed your families and such nonsense? Here's all the world's carbon emissions. Here we go. Over Asia, China contributes to 30.9%, while India is sitting at 7.3% of the world's emissions. Iran at 20%. I can't see Japan because there's a big green circle around Canada. South Korea is at 1.7, Indonesia 1.7, Saudi Arabia 1.8, the US at 13.5, and I'll remind you, the US doesn't have a carbon tax. Mexico sitting at, I believe that's a 1.1%. South Africa at 1.2, Australia 1.1, the rest of the world 21.7, Italy at 0.9, Germany at 1.9, Russia 4.7, Turkey 1.2, Poland 0.9, UK 0.9, but Canada an astonishing 1.5. So Canada is only responsible for 1.5% of all the carbon's emissions, and this is conducted by Global Carbon Atlas as of 2021. Important to get those quotes because somebody like Captain Socks might label this as misinformation. Not to mention the Bering Forest across Canada that also sucks up quite a bit of that 1% of carbon that we emit. So when they talk about arson, when they talk about floods, this is all part of natural shifts within our climate. Paying taxes doesn't get rid of that. Ironically, though, among the report's more heavily redacted sections is one carrying the subtitle Erosion of Trust. The past 7 years have seen marked social and political polarization in the Western world. Well, isn't that funny? Because for 8 of those 7 years, Justin Trudeau has been the Prime Minister of Canada. Reads a partial first sentence with the entire rest of the section deleted by government censors. The censor's pen also deleted most of the section warning about paranoid populism. Capitalizing on the rise of political polarization and conspiracy theories have been populists willing to tailor these messages to appeal to extremist movements, reads the section's non-redacted portions. Now, again, they're calling us all extremists, far right-wing, MAGA style. You've seen all that brought in. This is them sweating because all their corruption has been proven. We just seen it with Garnet Genius showing exactly where the corruption's sitting. The RCMP is investigating Indigenous affairs, and nothing's going to come of it. An analysis last year by University of Calgary economist Trevor Tombe found that if Canada had merely kept pace with U.S. productivity growth for the last 5 years, Canadian per capita earnings would be $5,500 higher than they are now. Meanwhile, housing affordability has reached worst ever levels in most Canadian major markets, according to a December analysis by Royal Bank of Canada, on average, even condominiums are now so unaffordable that only 44.5% of the Canadian households had sufficient income to buy one at current prices. As for single-family homes, only the richest 25% of Canadian households had any hope of obtaining one. Economic forecasts for the next 5 years and beyond are bleak, reads the RCMP's assessment of the rest of the decade, even adding a quote from French President Emmanuel Macron that the end of abundance is nigh. This is scary. I think civil unrest is already here. We've seen it. We saw it particularly back in 2022, when the Freedom Convoy descended upon Ottawa. People were pushed into a corner. And again, I've often said in videos, you can only push an animal so far before it strikes back. Well, with this massive increase in carbon taxes coming our way April 1st, aside from tomorrow night's vote of non-confidence that Pierre Poilievre is putting through, or I guess tonight's by the time you guys see this video, it's going to be curious to see just what Canadians are prepared to do, especially when pushed into desperate measures. If people can't afford to feed their children, if people can't afford to buy clothing for their kids or pay their mortgages and lose their homes, people do desperate things in desperate times. So again, I'm certainly not condoning any of this, but let me know what you guys think. Let me know if we're going to see anything like that, or if you think we're going to see civil unrest. Should the RCMP and Justin Trudeau be sweating as much as they are according to this report? Let me know your comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.